Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's web event, ERP Success Factors. My name is Steve, and I'll be your host today. If you haven't joined us for our webinar series yet, I will explain here how you can participate today. You should see something that looks like this on your own screen. If you'd like to ask a question as we present today, just type your question into the question pane and hit send. Then at the end of the webinar today, we will have a Q&A session and answer any questions that you submit. I'm very happy to be joined by Dave Woodworth today. Dave is the president at Terillium. He oversees all of our sales and operations, including all of our implementation projects. Dave is going to be leading the ERP Success Factors discussion today. If we haven't met you yet, I'll give you a brief introduction to Terillium. We are an ERP consulting firm specialized in implementing enterprise resource planning for our customers. ERP projects can be risky if they're not performed properly, but Terillium is very proud to have won many awards for our ERP implementations. We have a saying that we're only as good as our last reference, and we're very proud that many of our implementations have been award-winning. And we recognize all of our consultants for their ability to deliver these award-winning services. We do have over 170 full-time employee-based consultants across the United States. They average over 16 years experience with ERP applications and with experience in your industry. We started this web series to assist companies like you who might be thinking about an ERP project. That can be a daunting journey, and we thought this would be a great way to make the process a little bit easier. We've had several great sessions. We kicked off the week with a session describing how to minimize mistakes and maximize ROI of ERP projects. We had live demonstrations of NetSuite, Oracle's ERP Cloud, and JD Edwards ERP solutions. This morning we compared cloud and on-premise ERP systems, and this afternoon, of course, we are talking about ERP project success factors. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave Woodworth. Again, Dave oversees all of our projects at Terillium. In this capacity and in his former positions, he's oversaw more than 500 ERP projects, which I think gives him some unique experience on what makes these projects successful. So Dave, welcome to the webinar. We're excited to hear about your experience with ERP projects.
Well, thanks, Steve, and good afternoon to everyone. I appreciate, Steve, you putting this session on and making me go last. So I hope everyone has enjoyed the web series. As Steve said, that I've been involved with ERP for over 25 years, and I've seen a lot of things with projects, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I built this presentation about 5-6 years ago, and I presented it to dozens of clients and prospects. And really, what you should get from this presentation is it doesn't matter what ERP product you implement. These factors would be pertinent to any one of them. I'm going to go through several different factors, and not any one is going to cause a project to succeed or fail, but I think they're good talking points that you should think about when you're embarking on a very large project. When you buy ERP, the implementation is usually probably the biggest cost component and could be the riskiest or it could be a very risky process if you don't think about some of these factors. So what I've done is I've kind of grouped the factors into 3 broad categories: technology, people, and processes. And I'll go through and talk about each one of these. So from a technology standpoint, I've heard some horror stories out there over the years where companies will say, oh, our ERP project was a failure. The software just didn't work. It was all the software's fault. And, what I've seen in my 500 plus projects with ERP is, the software is a business tool. It's not going to cause failure, and it's definitely not going to ensure success. But, many of the products that you may have seen this week on our webinar series, there are thousands and thousands of customers that have implemented those solutions successfully. So when I hear someone saying that the project was a failure because of the software, I typically have to kind of raise my eyebrows and say, is it really the software? And what I have found is it's not typically the software. Another thing from a technology, and no one ever talks about this, and I feel like I've really been a pioneer in discussing this, is one of the biggest activities on projects are a lot of the technical activities. And one example is data conversions. A lot of times I've seen on projects, they don't even think about data conversions until they get to month 3 or month 4. And my point to this is these projects or these activities need to be started very early on projects, day 1. In fact, I argue that things like data conversion should be started even before you kick off the project. Probably one of the biggest activities on an ERP project is data conversions, and people always underestimate the level of effort to get that done. So when I talk about data conversions, I'm referring to bringing data from your legacy system over to the new ERP. And there's dozens and dozens of tables in the new ERP that need to get populated. One example that I give is I had a client that was a manufacturing client, and I gave him this presentation to the CFO and the president of the company prior to beginning the project, and the CFO said, "Dave, don't worry, our data is clean. I hear you. We will have no issues." And we got into the project, and we started data conversions day 1. But as we got to about month 2, we started getting into some deeper tables, such as bill of materials and routing, which are manufacturing tables that need to get populated. And what we found out at the end of month 2 is that this client had 20,000 finished good items, yet in their legacy system they had 0 routings to make the product. And what we had to explain to them is for our ERP product to run, you need to populate the routings so that you know how to make the product, how to cost the product from a labor standpoint. So they had to spend upwards of 3 months manually creating 20,000 finished good routings. I've seen it where we're converting customer masters, and they give us a spreadsheet, and I look at it and I see 25 different customers, all called Walmart. They're spelled differently, some are all caps, and no one can tell us which one is the real Walmart. And it's just over 30 years of doing business with Walmart and having different people enter customer masters in their legacy system. They had created 25 different Walmarts. We don't want to bring over all that garbage into the new ERP, so cleaning up the data is a huge effort, and that's the part of data conversion that can happen prior to even starting the project. Other activities like integration to third-party products and reporting. Everyone wants to wait for reporting till the very tail end, and next thing you know, you don't have time to do all the reports. So we say you need to, catalog all your reports way early. Do it before the project starts, and use those reporting metrics as, barometers for how you set up the new software. So the key is you've got to start these activities early, and a lot of people don't do that. If we go on to another broad category of people, and this is a pretty big area when I talk about success factors. When it comes down to it, when you do a project like an ERP implementation, it's a joint effort between yourselves and your implementation partner. And you must work together. And there are a lot of things that I like to bring to the table and say, this is what you should be doing. First and foremost, I explained that an ERP system is a business system. Therefore, the business really should own the ERP project. I would tell you 9 times out of 10, our clients say, well, this is an IT project. And then I say, well, who's entering sales orders? Who's entering work orders? Who's doing the costing? And it never is the IT people, it's always someone in the business. So this is a business system, so why wouldn't it be owned by the business? The IT area should be support on the project. They have a major, major role on the project, but it is in a supporting role. The goal of an ERP project should be to create internal experts at your company. You don't want a consulting firm coming in and doing all the work in a silo all by themselves, because at the end of the project, you're going to need that consulting firm to stick around, and you're not going to have the internal expertise. So it takes a lot of time and effort from the client standpoint to participate on these projects. To continue on, the project sponsor, we ask that every project have a sponsor, and we want this person to be a business executive, someone that has the power to make decisions. There are going to be a number of issues that come up during the project, and there will be battles between departments, and we need someone to be able to stand up and make the tough calls. That's why we think it needs to be an executive. It could be the CFO, the COO. I've had the president be the sponsor, but it has to, I believe, someone from the business. The client also should provide a project manager. Your consulting firm will provide a project manager, but we as consultants don't have power over the client employees and the client core team that's going to be participating on the project. So it's important that the client provides someone that can oversee the internal team. We argue it should be someone from the business, again, because it's a business system. I will tell you that the vast majority of the time, it's the IT director is the project manager. And again, this one success factor by itself, if the IT director is the project manager, is not going to cause failure. But one thing I can tell you is that in a lot of our clients, the IT department doesn't necessarily have the power to oversee all of these different business areas. And we find that a lot of times certain business users will run back to their vice president and say, oh, they're making me do this or that, and now you start getting into some issues across departments. You're always going to have those issues, but you know, if we can get someone from the business that's dedicated, this is not a 2-hour-a-week role. This person should be respected and across the different department lines. You need to have executive buy-in and involvement. I had a client that actually went with a competitor of ours and implemented the software but did not go live. And 1.5 years after the project started, the CEO called me and said, hey Dave, would you come out here? I've got a mess. And I came out there and I talked to him and I said, well, I'm not going to just go say, yeah, we can implement your project for you. Let's sit down and go through and understand what went wrong. And so I use these success factors as a, you know, kind of a gauge to kind of see where things fell apart. And with that specific client, the executives had absolutely no involvement on the project. And the different business areas did not get along, and no one was above trying to keep the peace and kind of lay down the law. So we say the executives need to be bought in and visible on the project. Doesn't mean they're implementing the software, but they need to be visible. The other key team that needs to be involved from the client is what we call the core team. The core team is a group of people that are going to work side by side with the consulting firm and their consultants. Typically, we see a 1.5 to 2 times the amount of hours from the client as it is to the consulting firm. So you need to have core team members on the project. That means they need to have adequate time. Again, this is not a 2-hour-a-week effort. What we tell our clients is we like to see at least 50% of the time dedicated to the project. I've had more and I've had less, but I can say at a minimum 50 is a good success factor rating. The other thing is we need the people you can't afford to lose. I had a client that I gave this presentation to, and he said, Dave, I've heard what you said. I'm going to give you 10 people full-time dedicated to the project. And I'm going to put you off-site away from corporate headquarters so they don't get bothered. And I was like, wow, that's best practice. I've never seen that. And we got into the project, and about month 4 or 5, I started hearing rumors. And what I heard was that the 10 people that the CEO gave us, the week before our project was to start, they were actually going to get laid off. And the CEO stopped that and said, wait a minute, you know, Dave said we need dedicated people and so forth. Well, he didn't hear this, that I needed people you can't afford to lose. So he gave me 10 people that they were going to get laid off. They weren't trusted. They weren't respected. They somewhat understood the business, but they couldn't necessarily make the decisions. So we set up the system during those first 5 months and found out that a lot of it was not the way it should be. So that project ended up going over budget and over time because we had to go back and revisit it. So it's very important to have the A players on the project. I've never had a client tell myself, hey, Dave, you can put your C players on the project from the consulting side. We don't have C players, but we would never do that. We are always putting our best players onto the project. These core team members have to be able to make decisions. If they have to go talk to 3, 4, 5 other people to get a decision made, you can take the timeline and probably double it. You can't do that. You have to trust that these people can make decisions. These team members need to be drivers of change and be willing to think outside of the box. We hear all the time, oh, we can't do that. Why is that? Well, that's because we always do it this way. Well, that is not a good sign. You just spent a lot of money on the software and you're spending a lot of money on the implementation. You should take advantage of what the new software can do. The core team members have to work as a team and make compromises where needed. They have to be able to jump into the details. I had another client that listened to this presentation, and he gave me a good core team in terms of they were able to make decisions, they were respected. He gave me at least half time. What we found out was all of the core team members were vice presidents. They never used the ERP system. They understood the business and they could make decisions, but they weren't the hands-on type of people. And I told the CFO, it's great that you're giving me these people, but we need the next layer down, the people that actually touch the keyboard. We need them involved. So they ended up doing it, but those are the kinds of things that we've seen. So giving us all vice presidents is not going to be a successful project. These ERP projects, definitely a give and take. This is an integrated system. It impacts everyone. So, one of the things that I've seen in many, many companies is that a lot of departments within the company do not get along. I tell a story that this happened actually a number of years ago, but just to show kind of to the level that I've seen, the client departments did not get along. In fact, they hated each other. And I was in a meeting between manufacturing and accounting, and they started yelling at each other. and it got to the point that they stood up and started pushing each other physically while I was sitting in the room. I'll say that has not happened since that time, but I see all the time there are arguments and people don't want to compromise, and that's why you need that executive sponsor that can say, hold on, this is what we're going to do. Again, the consulting firm doesn't have the power to control that. But those are the kinds of politics that we see that can derail a project. What we see is a lot of times our clients' legacy systems, they could be 35 years old and heavily customized, and they have customized it for every single user, department. And when you go to a best-of-breed ERP system, you should take advantage of what that system is giving you. These ERP companies invest millions of dollars in R&D and have implemented in thousands of companies, and it's built on best practices. So the client should take advantage of that. I always say compromise, and that's a lot of times we have to play referee, but hopefully that doesn't make a huge impact on the project. So those are some of the people success factors. From a process standpoint, the first thing we talk about is you really need to have a formal methodology on how to implement the software you are implementing. So from Terillium standpoint, we have a methodology to implement our ERP systems. And we have developed it, and we continuously are improving it. And everybody should be following that. It's a roadmap. Our clients don't know how to implement the software most times. So they are looking for their consulting partner to bring a methodology to play. A methodology should be formal and very structured. It should be a list of detailed tasks, different tools and templates that can be used on the project. We use things that we can reuse on projects, so we're not starting from scratch. But your methodology needs to be flexible. And that's one of the key differentiators of Terillium, is we don't force our way down the throats of our client. We say, here's our methodology, and we'll sit down and say, what are some things that you would like to do differently? And if it doesn't impact or jeopardize the project, we are more than happy to do those things. So flexibility is key. Another process metric is training. That's a no-brainer. I mean, if you don't train, how are you going to build those internal experts, and how are you guys going to be self-sufficient with your system? Training is not a one-time event. And I find that a lot of times when people say training, they think, yeah, at the end of the project, we'll train our people and we're done. Actually, as you can see on this slide, I've listed several different activities that happen throughout the project that we consider training. We train the upfront core team within the first 3 weeks of the project. And that's just to get them familiar with all the modules that are in scope. Your core team will not be experts at the end of that training, but it is a starter. We may supplement it with the Oracle vendor training. The core team works side by side with our consultants every week. And when they're working side by side, that is, in fact, a form of training. We do multiple, what we call testing scenarios called conference room pilots. And we do those throughout the project to test the design and configuration of the system. And those events take 2 to 3 weeks each. And we find that those things are, again, a form of training. And then at the end, we do train the end users, and we develop tools and aids to assist in that training and for ongoing training after, the project is live. So again, training is not a one-time event. It is a massive effort all throughout the project. one of the things that everyone hears about when they think of ERP failures or what could go wrong, it's the whole change management. I have seen countless examples of where this has caused issues on projects. But the key is you need to manage the change. I actually had a client, and I give you an example that is to the extreme, but to make the point. We had a client that had a shipping clerk who on their legacy system never had to do anything on the system. When she shipped product, she manually wrote down what she shipped on a piece of paper, and then she would, at the end of the day, walk it into the accounting department, and then the next day, accounting would enter the shipments into their system. I don't need to tell you that that makes absolutely no sense. You can see what kind of issues, inventory accuracy, real-time information, you're going to have a lot of issues. You're prone to error, for instance. So in our project, not only was the shipping person going to enter the transaction directly into the system, they were also going to be using some data collection to streamline it. So we brought this person in for some of the testing scenarios, and what we found out is not only did she not use the legacy system, but she did not know how to use a mouse. So I had to take one of our consultants and literally spend almost 2 weeks, not full time, but 2 weeks working with her on just how to use a mouse. It was a struggle. And at the end of the day, about a month before go live, this person from the client quit and told the supervisor that she just didn't want to change. She saw no reason why she couldn't just write it on a piece of paper. She was near retirement, and she decided to quit. That's an extreme example, but we see all the time where people say, I can't change that, I can't do that. I had a customer service rep look at our screen, and our screen was blue, and she goes, why isn't it green? She was used to a green screen. And I said, well, our system isn't green. And she goes, well, I can't use it. I said, we can't change that in our system. Finally, they removed her from the project, and I don't believe she ended up sticking around. But we find that we spend a lot of time battling these change. And the key to managing change is you got to communicate. Communication is key on these projects. You need to communicate what the goal of the project is. At the very beginning, before you start, you should lay out what are the goals of this project and post them in the war room. So if someone comes in and says, well, I don't want to do this, go, well, let's go to the board and show me on the goals where that is. Usually we can fight that battle. One of the things that I saw back in the 90s, and not so much nowadays, is people would implement ERP with one idea of cutting headcount, and people know that. People have heard the horror stories. So what I tell the executives of our clients, if you're not going to do that, then announce it. Tell people that, because people are fearful that they're going to automate themselves out of a job. And so we encourage our executives, our clients, to announce that is not the goal. You should update everyone in the company at, what's going on with the project. Give updates. And it's not just to the core team, but it's to all employees. Get a board. Send out a monthly newsletter. Have a board where you post things. Another thing we see on projects that can cause things to go sideways, and this one is, I talk to the executives, and almost every time they go, this will never happen here, Dave. And I can tell you 99.99% of the time it happens. And it's what I call analysis paralysis. And let me simply put it to you this way. I ask our clients, how long did it take you to get your 35-year-old custom system to the point where you like it and it's perfect. And they always tell me, oh, it never is. We're constantly making changes. I said, so you didn't just implement your custom system in 8 months and then never touched it and made improvements? Oh, no. And then I go, well, why are you saying that our project, which is an 8-month timeline, let's say, that we have to get everything perfect? Why not get things to a point, go live, and then do continuous improvement? Because what happens is people can't make decisions. I had a client that had a, I'll say, somewhat unique quoting process to their customers. So their customers would call up and want to get a quote for some product. So we have a process at Terillium as part of our methodology where we create a design decision document, and we put down, here's what the issue is, and then we tell them, here are options to do it. And for this quoting example, we had 3 options. And we put, what are the pros and cons of each option? Well, we presented it to the client, and they picked option B. So we go in and we set up option B and spend weeks doing that. And about a month and a half later, we get to one of our testing cycles, and someone that was not involved in the decision making says, that's not going to work. We can't do option B. So we had to stop, go back, pull the document, and go back through the options, and they picked option A. I will keep this short. I will tell you they ended up option A after another month of time wasn't going to work. They ended up doing a customization, which was our option C, which we said do not do, but they lost literally 3+ months because they couldn't get the right people in the room to make the decision. And we see this all the time. I mean, I've been on projects where we make the decision pretty early on, what type of costing are you going to do? And the client picks standard costing. And we get to pick a time frame, month 6, someone else goes, we need to be actual costing. Well, that's a huge decision. You can't just undo that. And those are the kinds of things that we see, so you need to try and avoid this analysis paralysis. Another thing is when I hear someone say, boy, our ERP project was a failure, I say, oh, okay, what metrics are you using to gauge that? And most of the time, they can't give me metrics. The only metric that I've ever heard is, well, the consulting firm was over budget. Okay, that's one metric. So what we try and do as part of our methodology is get the client to identify specific metrics outside of just the budget that they are looking for to say this project was a success. And it gets back to, why are you doing this project? Put quantifiable goals and measure them throughout the project, and even identify goals for after you're live, i.e., I want to improve our on-time shipments to 98%. I want inventory accuracy to be 100%. Identify those 5 critical metrics, and when you're 6 months after go live, measure those things. Then come back and say, was the project successful? Because if you don't measure, if you don't define those goals, then you really can't say if something was successful or not. So that is a little bit on the success factors, Steve. You know, I can turn it back to you to, open it up for some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Definitely appreciate you sharing that experience with us today. Nice presentation. I will remind everyone that if you do have any questions, please submit those in your question pane within your GoToMeeting application. And we do have a couple of questions here, I think, Dave. Let me read these off and see what you think about these. So first one, If Terillium is acting as a middleman, for example, they're sending a consultant, what onboarding factors are handled by Oracle? So I think that maybe I'll take a crack at this, Dave, and then you could add some color. So the way Terillium's relationship with Oracle works is we are acting as the implementer, the complete implementer of the software. So Oracle typically in that relationship acts as the owner and the seller of the software. They provide all of your help and fixes as it relates to the software, future upgrades of the software. Terillium would be your sole provider of implementation services. So when it comes to things like onboarding, training, testing, setting up, that's all Terillium. Now occasionally our clients will choose to send their core team to some Oracle training on the software. Terillium can handle that as well, and we typically do for our clients, but that is available as an option from Oracle. I don't know, Dave, if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I agree with what you said. What I would say is, first of all, that we usually keep the Oracle salesperson engaged as part of the project. We actually encourage the client to include that person on the steering committee because there will be times in the project that we need that salesperson to go to bat for us being the client and us. And what that means is if we need to get help from support, the salesperson can help escalate the issue and get it done faster. Terillium also has access to development direct type resources that we can also do that. So it is a mixed bag on our projects in terms of the involvement from Oracle, but what Steve said is absolutely the basics of we are the implementer and we're the ones that are setting up and configuring the system.
Another one here, Dave, this is probably a good one for you. Is your consulting team using PMI and Lean Six Sigma methodologies?
Well, actually, you know, I mentioned we had a methodology, and we actually developed or revamped our methodology back in 2003, and we used all of the different aspects of Lean, Six Sigma. We said, what can we do to streamline the implementation and get rid of some of the non-value added activities that we as consultants had seen on prior methodologies, not here at Terillium per se, but we all came from other consulting firms. And so we built our methodology on what we consider best practices and tried to get rid of some of the waste that we would see on projects. And I get back at, you know, one of the comments I said is when we work with our clients, the key is being flexible. So an example, we had a client that they did everything with Agile and using the Scrum type methodology. That's not necessarily built into every step of our process. So what we did is we worked with that client and we built in some aspects of that so that it accommodated their internal practices. So that's the key, being flexible and working with your client to come up with the best thing for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd add that, you know, some of our consultants and a lot of our project managers that we use for some of our larger implementations do have PMI or Six Sigma certification and experience. But as Dave said, that Terillium methodology that we use is a blend of the best parts of different methodologies we've seen over the years.
Yep.
Great questions. Okay, one more here, Dave, and if anyone else has other questions, type them in here fast. If we don't get to them, we'd be happy to reply one-on-one. Dave, you mentioned a couple of specific metrics or goals of projects. Are there others you can list where you've seen customers use specific metrics to judge the success of their project? Have you seen any metrics that work really well to measure an ERP project?
Well, one of the things that I've seen was the time to make decisions. And how we measure that is, if we come up with an issue or a design decision, we track how long did it take to make that decision. Is it 2 days, 5 days, or 3 months? And that's a measure that I'll bring up to the steering committee and say, here are 5 issues that we've been dealing with for over 4 weeks. That is not going to make a successful project. So looking at that, the other thing is like the change management. I put together like a scorecard of red, green, yellow, and I'll put like if it's red for change management, and I'll put specific information in there like Jill in customer service is saying that she will not use J.D. Edwards order entry or Oracle's order entry program because of A, B, and C. And we'll identify where the issues are and then come up with solutions on how we can rectify any of those change issues. Those are, I guess, 2 examples. The other thing we do is we'll measure the time of people's involvement on projects. That's actually one of the things that hurts us the most is the client will say at the beginning, sure, you can have our core team for 50% of the time. And then we get 2 months in the project and something else becomes more important and somebody gets pulled away. So we measure that so that we have actual statistics and not just feelings and say, listen, we're not getting Jill's time. I mean, you said we were going to get 20 hours a week. We're getting 2. So those are the things that you need to measure because if we don't get the time, it is going to cause either the project to go over budget because Terillium is going to have to do more, or 2, you're not going to own the system and you're going to need to keep us around, and that's not going to be successful. So those are 3 that I can think off the top of my head that I typically see on projects.
Yeah, and another question just got submitted, Dave, that I think goes along with that pretty well, and that the question is, smaller companies have professionals that wear multiple hats, which impacts their ability to participate on a project. I know you've seen some unique solutions to that, Dave, but how do you answer, everybody runs lean nowadays. Not many companies have a spare team sitting around to dedicate to an ERP project. How have you seen that addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've worked with companies as small as probably $10 million in revenue, and I can tell you they don't have a lot of people that they can put forth onto a project. So maybe they can't give us 50%, and what we would suggest is give us what you can, but we may need to lengthen the duration of the project because if I can only get 10 hours a week, or pick a number, maybe I need to extend it a couple of months just to ensure that we've, transferred the knowledge to your team. I've seen clients get some temporary help in some lower level positions. But yeah, believe me, most of our clients run lean, and it's hard. That's why we didn't say we need 100% because we know we're never going to get that. But if you can't give the time and you're going to force the project to be done in 4 months, you're going to have problems.
Okay, great. So if anyone else has other questions, I encourage you to submit those. We'll probably need to follow up with you one-on-one. But I want to thank you all for your time today. I hope this was a valuable use of your hour, and certainly want to thank Dave for your time and lending us the experiences that you've seen over so many years implementing ERP projects. So thank you, everyone.